Hi, this is Callie Harris, and I am going to present my case study when a student's rights are wronged for my EDL 853 class. So, sections 1 and 2, we're going to discuss the summary of the event and the legal and ethical issues. So, Nottingham High School is in Dover. It has one high school with 3,200 students. 1/4 of the building remains as it was built in the 1950s, which means it is non-ADA compliant. We have a student, Miguel Hernandez, who moved to the district due to its excellence in academics and its football team. He was made a varsity quarterback his sophomore year. One evening, he was sacked, and due to that sack of the quarterback, he became paralyzed from the waist down. 2 weeks before he returned to school, Ms. Gussman, who is our counselor, discussed the return of Miguel to school with his parents. They informed her the only accommodation that he would need would be the use of a wheelchair. 2 weeks later, when Miguel shows up to his first hour biology class, he's informed he needs to meet with Ms. Gussman due to a schedule change. She has changed his biology class to a different science class that is no longer a college prep class. The next day, Miguel's mother and an attorney come to meet with the principal, claiming there has been a violation of Miguel's rights. And the truth of the matter is we did violate his rights. We will discuss more of that in answering the few questions, but he definitely did have his rights violated. So, a synthesis of what happened: Miguel had his rights violated due to the ADA and 504 plans and laws. His rights were violated. It happened in the high school building, and our counselor is the one who did not know the laws and violated his rights to free and appropriate public education. So, what should have been done prior to Miguel's return? The counselor probably should have met with his principal and had a discussion about the needs for his schedule and the needs for his wheelchair accommodations. And how could the situation with the attorney been avoided? So if we're going to be talking about our standards, develop policies and procedures for equitable and inclusive practice, our counselor really needed to be aware of the legal issues surrounding Miguel's return with his wheelchair. Had there been any communication between the counselor and the principal, I believe with 2 weeks' notice, we could have worked out a plan. And this plan could have been moving the biology classroom for that hour of the day to another classroom, or we could have worked with a construction company to work on widening the door. So qualifications for services. These are going to answer questions 3, 4, and 5. We've got to figure out the root cause for bias and cultivate equitable and inclusive and responsive instruction. Did Miguel qualify for services under the IDEA Act? The answer to that is no. He does have an orthopedic impairment, but no other cognitive impairment, so he would not qualify under this act. The ADA Act, absolutely. There's protection from discrimination at state, local, government, and public schools, which is mandatory. All classrooms must be accessible. There must be an elevator, a ramp, parking, accessible bathroom, lunchroom, and desks. The law requires relocation of programs or access made in older buildings. And the Section 504 Act Absolutely. No other qualified individual with a disability because of the reason of the disability can be excluded from any course that would be a stepping stone for their future. So if we're going to talk about and review and prioritize our stakeholders. So we have to discuss what's the conflict, what's the decision that's going to be made, who is it damaging to. So we would need to discuss with our stakeholders, with our superintendent, with our director of operations. Before Miguel came back to school, we would have needed to have a plan in place. The most with no plan, it would have been moving teachers to classroom with no change to the building. That would have been almost a no change. No change is what we got. Almost no change. Moving the teacher for 1 hour of the day to provide Miguel the services that he needed would be a very conservative plan. A liberal action would have been, as soon as we knew that Miguel would need to be using a wheelchair, we would have checked his schedule and or looked at the rest of that 1/4 of his building that was not ADA compliant and work on making every part of the building accessible for Miguel. So here we go. Question 6. Evaluate, advocate, cultivate equitable and inclusive and responsive supports. Are Miguel's parents entitled to a hearing to determine what Miguel is entitled to receive in terms of service and support? Absolutely, they are. The school is in violation of FAPE through ADA and 504 violations. Liability. Here was another question. Question 7. Would the opposing team's football player or any other agencies be held responsible for Miguel's injury? From what I can find, the answer to that is no. Not for schools, and student athletes assume normal risks involved in sports and most times are asked to complete a waiver in order to play. So when we look at question 8, who would I contact following the meeting with Miguel's parents and his attorney? First thing I would do is contact the superintendent, director of operations and human resources. The next person I would contact would be our school's attorney. I do believe that this also includes the Standard 6, monitor and ensure adherence to laws, rights, policies, and regulations. There would be many steps needed to take in this instance because we have opened ourselves to litigation through rights violations. Section 6 through 9, options and consequences, best paths, and next steps. So a very conservative course of action would be to move the biology class to another science classroom for 1 hour of a day. That would be an easy fix that would just inconvenience one teacher for 1 hour of the day, assuming that we could hold biology in another classroom. That would be a pro and an easy cost-saving measure that could be taken immediately. Long-term, I don't know that this would be a solution that would be favorable to many or to all, but it would be one that you could make quickly. On the more liberal end, without having to think of money or space or time or closing down classrooms to make everything ADA compliant immediately, I do think that bathrooms and accessibility to classrooms would need to be a number one priority. Finding the funds for that would probably become more difficult. I do think best path for Miguel to get back into his classroom immediately would be to move the classroom for the next day. That could happen immediately. And then the next step to be taken would be to get a plan in place to use maybe even capital outlay dollars to widen the classroom door as a first step, and then to work through all other accessible areas, starting with bathrooms, moving to parking spaces, desk, and lunchroom. Here we go. So question 9, would you meet with a school counselor who put the class change into place? I would think this is an absolutely yes. This goes with our standards of being able to communicate policy, law, regulations, and procedures to appropriate stakeholders. If she was unaware that what she did violated rights, it would be my responsibility as the principal to communicate them to her. She has to know that what she did was unacceptable, left her wide open to litigation as well as our school building and myself. It would be one that would have to happen immediately. Also, when we think of Section 9, what are some things that would happen? She needs to be aware of the consequences that could happen. She would need to be aware that through her actions, we are all going to be dealing with consequences and need to make change immediately. The next steps for her, I think, would be to visit again with Miguel's parents, maybe with the principal with her, and communicate that she was unaware that she had made these violations, and that we would be doing anything and everything we could to remedy that situation, and get Miguel back on track immediately. Solutions to this problem, I really think there would have to be some, long-term plans about how to quickly remedy the situation for the non-ADA compliance of the high school building. But I think the immediate need would be to get Miguel into his class starting the next day. And if that inconveniences an adult in the building, better that than a student. So if we're dealing again with legal issues, we would need to advocate for resources in support of needs. Do I think I could come to an agreement? Yes, I do. Again, I've provided many solutions, but I do think we could get Miguel back on track for his college prep classes easily and quickly, and then move forward on short-term plans and long-term plans to provide accessible resources for the school building. I hope that finishes up my case study, and thank you for listening.